Thanks for joining us on a road trip through rabbinic narrative. No agenda, just clarity. At the end of Parshas Yisro, after the giving of the Aseret Dibros, and after the narrative of Matan Torah is complete, there's a small section before the start of Parshas Mishpatim that deals with laws pertaining to the construction of the Mizbeach. It's just a few psukim long, and there's a lot here, a lot of things to look into, but I'd like to focus on the last two psukim, which talk about some requirements and restrictions relative to the construction of a Mizbeach Havanim. So first of all, it's interesting to point out that in terms of what kind of Mizbeach Hashem commands, he commands a Mizbeach Adama, just made out of dirt. And then he says later, Ve'em Mizbeach Avanim Ta'aseli, if you're going to construct a Mizbeach out of stone. So there's a couple of rules you have to follow. One is Lo Sivne Esen Gazis. You can't chisel it. Because I don't want you using a sword or any kind of metal material to carve it out and profane it. And additionally, velo sale v'malos al mizbechi. So when you're constructing an elevation platform to get up from the ground to the top of the mizbeach, you cannot construct it with steps. Rather, you need to construct it with a ramp. Why? Asher lo sigala ervasacha alav, so that you don't expose your erva upon it. There are two interesting midrashim that Rashi brings down that I want to focus on. But before getting to those midrashim, our first question is, why are these specific laws here right now? And especially considering that the next parsha is Parshas Mishpatim, which deals primarily with civil laws and laws between person and his fellow. This is one thing that we just wonder about. Not such a grand question, but just an interesting observation. But if we take a look at Rashi, he quotes two midrashim on each pasuk that seem to have a similar theme, but are actually hard to decipher and really understand what they're getting at. In terms of the first instruction, Mizbeach avanim tasali lo sivne esen gazis, Rashi says loshon geziza sheposan umisatasan barzal. So basically, you can't use any kind of metal in order to chisel it to construct it. Why? Ki charbacha hinafta aleha vatichal aleha. So there's a couple of different expositions that Rashi takes, but let's pick up from where he says, Va'od shamizbeach matil shalom ben Yisrael la'aviyim shabashamayim. The Rashi says that the Mizbeach is really there to create peace between Bnei Yisrael and Hashem. Therefore, it shouldn't be subject to something that's associated with cutting down and destruction. Uma avanim she'inam ra'os v'lo shomos v'lo medabros. Ayidei shematilos shalom amar Torah lo sanif aleim barzel. So if it's the case that for stones which don't see, they don't hear, they don't speak, and nevertheless, because they create a sense of shalom, the Torah says, don't subject them to any kind of metal. Hamatel shalom bin ish li ishto, bin mishpacha li mishpacha, bin adam li chavero, al achas kama v'kama shelo tivo'eu paranis. So one who, or a person who, can create peace between a man and his wife, between family members, between a man and his friend, how much more so will punishment or bad things not come to him? So that's the first kal v'chomer relative to that particular law. Rashi brings on another kal v'chomer of a similar fashion when referencing the halacha of v'lo sale ma'alos. He says, Kisha'ata bona kevesh lamizbeach lo sazim ma'alos ma'alos. You can't construct it with steps. Ela chala kehei u'meshupa. It has to be a ramp. Why? Because if you're going to go up steps, it's going to require you to take long strides. And because the Kohanim are wearing robes, there's going to be some form of exposure of erva. Even though it's not actual exposure of erva, it does remind one of that. And it's going to be a minhag bizayon to the actual Mizbeach. And he brings down, again, a kal v'chomer, right? So just as the Torah says that for these stones that don't have any knowledge, any awareness or consciousness to be strict about getting abused or being disgraced, since they have a particular purpose, don't behave with them in any kind of disgraceful way. Your friend, who is made in the image of your creator, the image of Hashem, and is makpid al bizyono, he is conscious of his own feelings and he doesn't want to be disgraced or embarrassed, how much more so should you treat him with the utmost respect and not in a minhag of bizayon. So these are really nice midrashim that Rashi brings down. They seem to be really nice kal v'chomers. But our question is, what is this? Is this just like a Musar Shmuz that Rashi is referencing for us? Are Chazal just taking an opportunity to transmit some nice lessons because they see some cute little kal v'chomers that they can make here to teach us some Musar? Or perhaps are these actually descriptions, or are these lessons that are integral to the ideas of Mizbeach itself? And so that's really the question we'd like to explore. Our intuition is actually that these are not just nice Musar Shmuzes, but that they're actually reflecting some core ideas related to the idea of Mizbeach, the idea of Korbanos, the idea of Avoda. But what could that be? Our first move was to look at the actual kal v'chomer. A kal v'chomer is usually a mechanism of legal reasoning to compare two things that share something in common and to derive rules from one to the other. It seems to be on the face of it that the logic just doesn't work out here. Think about it. In classical logic, a kal v'chomer usually requires something common between the two things that you're comparing. But the stones are completely non-sentient. They don't have feelings. They don't have consciousness. So it just begs the question, how are you deriving the way that you should treat other people from the way that you're required to behave towards the stone of the Mizbeach? If you take this literally, the logic fails. But our contention is Chazal aren't giving a legal deduction, the true kal v'chomer in the halachic sense like they do throughout Shas. Rather, they're refocusing our attention away from the ritual to what really matters to Hashem. Here we're discussing laws related to objects that are part of ritual, objects that are part of avoda, that seem to have nothing to do with bein adam l'chavero at all. And they are requiring a certain degree of respect, which is expressed through certain laws. One, not to use things associated with destruction, and also not to perform acts that might reflect any kind of immodesty. And that is important. And certainly when you're involved in avodas Hashem, that needs to be part of our consciousness. It requires a certain level of kavod. But respect in the arena of ritual, although it's nice and it's appropriate, it doesn't really end there. It must be used in a way where it carries over to your relationships with people. So even though it's true that there are requirements related to the Mizbeach, related to the ritual, and they're important because Kvod Shamayim demands a certain degree of respect, that's not really why these halachos are there. Rather, these laws are there to instill within a person a certain sensitivity, a certain respect that needs to be expressed in their relationships with other people and how they treat other people. And so it's true, it's not a kal v'chomer like in a halachic logical sense, but it is a kal v'chomer in a overall approach to Torah, that a person should not be satisfied with meeting ritual requirements with a certain consciousness that he has when it comes to the world of bein adam l'makom, and have a totally separate identity when it comes to bein adam l'chavero. Rather, it's all one system. And we even need to recognize that when it comes to the ideas related to bein adam l'makom, as important as they are, they really need to find expression in bein adam l'chavero, and that's really what Hashem is getting at. Hashem's concern with the way that we behave towards objects, such as the stones of the Mizbeach, is not really about the objects per se. It's not even about Hashem's kavod himself per se. It's really more about ingraining in us a certain sensitivity, having us incorporate into our own personalities a certain level of sympathy, empathy, so that we can improve our relationships with people who actually do have a tzelem Elokim. I think this would answer the question that we asked earlier, which is, what's this doing in between Matan Torah and the Parsha of Mishpatim? But it seems like maybe that's what Chazal were picking up on, is that they're looking at Parshas Mishpatim and they're seeing all of these laws related to bein adam l'chavero. And it could be that they're extrapolating that even these laws, which immediately precede it, are really there ultimately to enhance the bein adam l'chavero experience, the bein adam l'chavero dynamic. It turns out that when we look at the regulations and the laws and requirements in terms of our relationship with Hashem, we need to carry that over to our relationship with other people as well. And we would go so far as to highlight that what Chazal are saying is that if you don't have the proper way of relating to other people, proper level of sympathy and empathy that's required, it's not only that you're missing in your relationship with people, but that your relationship with Hashem is still intact. It's almost like you can't have one without the other. If you're not expressing a certain amount of respect, sympathy, and empathy towards other people, whether they're your nuclear family or whether they're the extended family or beyond, then what it really means is that there's something lacking in your relationship with Hashem. And if this is true, so it turns out that Chazal are not just giving us a Musar Shmuz, but they're actually pointing us to the core idea underlying the laws related to how we treat the Mizbeach and showing us where the fulfillment of those laws really sits. With this line of thinking, we can also explain why Chazal use two different Kal v'chomers, even though they seem to hit on a very similar theme. The first Kal v'chomer is talking about creating shalom. The second one is talking about treating people with dignity. Those two really capture the two dimensions of what Bein Adam L'Chaveru entails, what we actively contribute to the relationships and how we conduct ourselves within them. Thanks so much for joining us. In our next episode, we're going to take up the Medrash that dates Eo's funeral to the time that the Meraglim were scouting Eretz Canaan. Why are Chazal telling us this? Are they trying to tell us when Eov actually lived? Or perhaps they're trying to frame the perspective of the Meraglim for us to understand better. See you on the next road trip.